The sky over Utah glowed with strange lights twisting and turning in ways no one could understand. People stopped their cars on the highway, staring with wide eyes, pointing fingers up at the flickering colors that painted the desert in eerie shades of green and violet. The wind seemed to carry a hum that made hair stand on end. Dogs barked nervously, and some people felt a chill crawl along their spines even though the air was warm. Families stepped onto porches, shielding their eyes as streaks of light moved faster than any plane or helicopter. The mountains reflected the glow, making shadows dance and shift in shapes that looked almost alive. The lights paused for a moment in the valley, and everyone felt a strange stillness, like the world had stopped breathing. A farmer leaning on his fence squinted, trying to make sense of the shapes, but they shimmered and blurred like water in a mirage. He felt a mix of awe and fear, and called out to his neighbor, who was already running across the field, shouting words that made no sense because the sounds seemed swallowed by the night. Some teenagers climbed onto the roof of a barn holding flashlights and phones, hoping to capture the spectacle, but the beams of their lights barely touched the glowing shapes that moved with silent purpose. The air tasted different, metallic and sweet at the same time, and one by one more people emerged from homes and cars, drawn by curiosity or terror or a feeling they could not name. Everyone was whispering and pointing, and no one dared to speak loudly for fear of breaking some invisible rule. The lights started to descend, slowly dipping toward the desert floor, and the sand seemed to ripple beneath them, as if the earth itself was alive. Shadows stretched long and twisted across rocks and sagebrush. A few bold souls took a step forward, their hearts pounding, their breaths quick and shallow. The lights pulsed and flickered as if acknowledging their presence. Some felt an urge to run, others felt an urge to stay and watch. Everything felt heightened. Sounds were louder, smells sharper. The hum in the wind grew into a vibration that made chests thrum and the ground beneath their feet feel both solid and fragile. The sky suddenly brightened in one massive flash, and people shielded their eyes. When it faded, the lights had shifted, forming a pattern that made no sense to anyone. Yet somehow it felt familiar, like a memory half forgotten. People murmured to each other, fear and wonder mixing in voices that trembled as they tried to describe what they had seen. The night was alive, and the desert had become a stage for something beyond imagination, and no one would ever forget the first night. The lights appeared in Utah, spread like wildfire through the town, everyone talking at once, voices overlapping, laughter and fear mixing in a strange, chaotic rhythm. At the diner, people leaned across tables, whispering hurriedly. Some swore they saw figures moving on the hills. Others claimed to hear low humming that made their bones ache. The waitress poured coffee with shaking hands, glancing nervously out the window, where the sky still glimmered faintly from the lights. The sheriff tried to calm everyone, but his own eyes betrayed disbelief. The local news vans lined the streets, cameras pointing toward the desert, and reporters scribbled notes furiously, hoping to capture something tangible. But every broadcast was distorted, and static filled the screens. It was as if the sky itself refused to be recorded. The townspeople shared stories that grew more elaborate with each retelling. One man claimed the lights had followed him home, hovering just above his roof. Another woman said she felt a hand brush her shoulder, but when she turned, no one was there. Children whispered to each other in the schoolyard about beings with glowing eyes and voices that spoke inside your head. Only the brave or the foolish ventured out at night to glimpse the phenomenon themselves, while others stayed behind, watching shadows stretch across the desert, listening for that humming that no one could explain. The tension in the town was electric, curiosity battling fear at every corner. The air seemed heavier, and every rustle in the bushes sparked panic, yet also excitement. People began leaving notes and sketches on doors and windows, markings that might be warnings or pleas for answers. Nobody knew. Some took photographs, but when developed, the images showed only faint outlines and strange blurs that moved like liquid across the page. The diner became the center of a community caught between wonder and dread, a place where strangers became allies, united by the impossible, and everyone waited for the night to fall again, wondering if what they saw tonight would return, or if it was just the beginning of something far greater and far more terrifying than anyone could imagine. One night, the desert fell silent except for the faint rustle of sagebrush and the distant howl of a coyote. The stars twinkled like diamonds, but the sky was different somehow, heavier, brighter, as if holding its breath. A lone farmer walked his dog across the empty field, the sand cold beneath his boots, when suddenly, a shadow appeared. On the horizon it was massive, hovering above the ground, glowing with lights that shifted from blue to green to gold and pulsed. Slowly, like a heartbeat, the dog froze, barking and whining, pulling at the leash. The farmer felt a wave of fear mixed with awe, his heart pounding so loudly he thought it might burst. He stepped closer, squinting at the craft. It was unlike anything he had ever imagined. No wings, no rotors, just smooth metal shimmering as if liquid. The desert air hummed, vibrating through his chest, and the shadows around him stretched unnaturally. Then the doors of the craft slid open silently, and figures emerged, humanoid yet unlike any human, their limbs long and slender, their skin shimmering faintly like opal, their eyes glowing softly without menace or malice. The farmer took a step back, unsure whether to run or stay. The figures paused, looking directly at him. It was as if they could see his fear and curiosity. At once, one lifted a hand slowly in a gesture that felt like both greeting and invitation. Images flashed in the farmer's mind, visions of distant planets, swirling colors, cities built from light, and beings moving gracefully across strange landscapes. He stumbled backward, overwhelmed, unable to speak. The aliens made no sound, but the thoughts continued, a language of pictures and feelings that defied words. And then, just as suddenly, a bright pulse of light erupted from the craft, blinding him for a moment. When his vision cleared, the figures had returned to the ship, and it hovered silently, a heartbeat before lifting and vanishing into the sky, leaving the farmer standing alone in the desert, trembling and gasping, unable to decide if he had dreamed everything or if the impossible had really happened. The desert felt empty and alive at the same time, as if it had been holding its breath and now exhaled slowly. The farmer stood frozen, staring at the spot where the craft had disappeared, his mind buzzing with the images the aliens had shown, colors and cities that made no sense and yet felt familiar. He could still feel their presence lingering in the air, a warmth that was not heat, and a weight that pressed gently on his chest. Later that night, others reported seeing the figures again, moving silently across the dunes, their glowing eyes scanning the ground and sky as if studying the earth itself. One teenager swore the beings seemed to glide just above the sand, their shadows stretching impossibly long and bending around rocks and cacti as they moved without sound. The witness could not tell if they were real or some trick of the light, yet every instinct screamed truth and fear. The townspeople spoke in hushed tones about the calmness the aliens carried, like a wave that both soothed and unsettled at once. Some felt telepathy, images flashing in their heads of distant galaxies, oceans of light and beings moving in perfect harmony. It was overwhelming, beautiful and terrifying, and no one could look away even when the skin on their arms prickled and hair stood on end. The creatures did not speak, yet they communicated a presence that demanded attention, understanding, and respect. The desert seemed to respond to them, rocks glinting in strange ways, wind shifting without warning. Even the animals reacted different, running and hiding, yet some gazed silently at the figures as if recognizing something deep and ancient. And then the craft would reappear, hovering silently for moments before vanishing again, leaving questions unanswered. Impressions burned in memory, and the town caught between awe and fear, wondering if they had glimpsed visitors from another world or if reality itself had shifted and nothing would ever feel the same again. One night, a young witness crept closer to the craft, heart pounding, every step measured. The aliens stood waiting, their glowing eyes fixed on the human, as if reading thoughts. A wave of calm washed over fear, battling curiosity. Images filled the mind of distant worlds, cities of light, oceans of shimmering colors, beings moving with perfect grace. The witness felt a pull, a desire to step closer, to understand, to touch, to learn. The air thrummed with energy. The aliens raised hands slowly, and a sensation of warmth spread through the body, a language without words, without sound, thoughts and feelings flowing like a river. The witness understood without speaking that they came in peace, that knowledge and observation were the only goals. The pulse of light from the craft synchronized with the heartbeat. A connection formed, fragile yet profound. The desert held its breath, and the witness knew life had changed forever. Something unimaginable had reached out and touched humanity. The morning after the encounter, the town was buzzing with activity and tension, like a live wire. No one slept properly, and the air was thick with anticipation. The sheriff tried to maintain order, but even he could not deny the strange occurrences that had unfolded overnight. Drones were sent to the desert, cameras pointed and recording, yet every attempt to capture evidence ended in failure. The The screens flickered and filled with static images blurred and twisted like liquid. The townspeople gathered at the diner, sharing their experiences, some speaking in whispers, others shouting over each other. Each story grew wilder than the last. One man claimed to have touched the alien's skin and felt a pulse of energy run through his arm. Another insisted he had seen the craft vanish into the clouds only to reappear a mile away in an instant. Reporters scribbled furiously, capturing fragments of conversations and sketches of the figures. The air was thick with excitement and fear, and a sense of urgency, as if the world itself had shifted and no one could ignore it. Scientists arrived with equipment heavier than the imagination could hold. Instruments that should have measured every detail were disrupted. Magnetic fields shifted, readings spiked, and cameras malfunctioned. Every attempt to get close was met with interference, as if the aliens knew the town was watching. Their presence remained constant, though unseen flashes of glowing eyes were reported at the edge of vision. Dogs barked at nothing, shadows moved unnaturally, and the wind carried whispers that no one could place. The desert became a theater of mystery, with the townspeople, both audience and participants. Everyone felt watched, a strange electricity in the air, nerves taut and minds racing, wondering if the aliens were testing them, observing reactions, taking note of who approached, who fled, who dared to step closer. Every night, new reports surfaced, lights that darted in impossible directions, strange footprints appearing and vanishing in the sand, recordings that played back with distortions, messages that seemed to hide patterns, all combining to create a sense of something larger at work, something beyond comprehension yet undeniably present. The town waited collectively, holding its breath for another glimpse, another sign, a moment that could reveal a fraction of the truth, while the desert remained calm yet alive, holding secrets and possibilities that no one could grasp. But everyone felt deep in their bones that the ordinary world had ended and something extraordinary had begun. Without warning, the night changed, the sky suddenly brighter as the craft hovered low above the desert sands, its lights pulsing like a heartbeat faster than before. The townspeople who had gathered at the edge of the field watched in frozen awe. Some clutched each other while others could not look away. The aliens moved with the same graceful precision, but there was a sense of urgency now, a tension in their gestures that had not been there before. The hum in the air deepened, vibrating through every bone and filling lungs with a strange pressure. The stars seemed to flicker, and the ground beneath trembled slightly. A blinding pulse of light erupted from the craft, and for a moment the world disappeared. The townspeople shielded their eyes, and when they dared to look again, the craft was gone, vanished as if it had never existed, leaving only faint scorch marks on the sand and footprints that faded too quickly to trace. The aliens were nowhere to be seen. The air hung heavy with silence, broken only by whispers and gasps. Hearts still racing. The desert looked ordinary, yet something lingered, a feeling of being observed, a presence that had left its mark but refused to stay. The townspeople stood in stunned disbelief, each person processing the impossible in their own way. Some laughed nervously, others wept silently. Everyone knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, yet no one could explain it or prove it. The desert returned to stillness, yet nothing would feel the same again. The memory of the lights, the beings, and the sudden disappearance burned in every mind, and everyone felt that whatever had come to Utah that night had left a door open, a secret whispered across the sands, a mystery that would echo in their lives forever. And the quiet of the desert seemed to pulse, as if remembering what had passed and waiting for the next impossible moment to arrive. In the town slowly returned to a fragile kind of normal, but nothing felt the same. The desert seemed quieter yet more alive. Every shadow, every rustle of wind, sparked memories of the lights and the figures that had vanished without a trace. Children whispered about glowing eyes in their dreams, and some awoke screaming. Parents exchanged worried glances, but no one could deny the strange stories. The diner became a gathering place for those who had seen or felt something strange late at night. People spoke in low tones, comparing memories, sketches, and photographs that showed nothing but blurred outlines and shifting lights. Scientists and reporters lingered long after the initial events, trying to decode the patterns in the footage. Every attempt only created more questions. Some townspeople claimed to hear humming at night, soft and distant, while others swore their electronics acted strangely. Phones glitching, radios filling with static, and cameras catching fleeting glimmers of shapes in the corners of vision. The desert itself seemed to remember, leaving footprints that shimmered briefly before fading into nothing. Some brave or foolish souls ventured out at night hoping for another glimpse, only to return with hearts pounding and minds racing. Nothing tangible remained, yet the memory of the visitors had etched itself into every detail of the town windows. Reflected glimmers of light that were not there, and shadows moved just slightly off from reality. Conversations always returned to the impossible, wondering if the aliens had observed them, recorded their reactions, or left signs hidden in plain sight. Every glance at the horizon carried anticipation, dread, and hope that something extraordinary might return. The ordinary world of the town had ended, and the extraordinary had begun. People no longer slept easily, or walked without watching the sky, and even years later, the desert held its secrets quietly, waiting for someone to notice the faint traces of light, the whispers of wind, and the memory of beings who had stepped out of the unknown and vanished, leaving humanity to wonder what really happened that night. Years passed, and the town never forgot the night the lights appeared. Everyone carried pieces of memory like fragments of a dream. Some studied the footage endlessly, searching for patterns and hidden messages. Computers analyzed every frame. Signals were run through filters again and again, trying to detect a pulse, a code, or a clue. One of the original witnesses discovered something peculiar in the blurred images, a faint rhythm pulsing like a heartbeat, too precise to be random. When enhanced, the shapes formed symbols and coordinates pointing to a location far beyond the desert, almost impossible to reach, yet clearly deliberate. The revelation spread quickly through the community. Some dismissed it as imagination, while others felt the truth trembling at the edge of understanding. Researchers and amateur scientists flocked to the town trying to decode the hidden message. The symbols seemed to communicate a story of observation and guidance, a record of what had been seen and what might come next. The desert itself held the memory of the encounter, almost alive, almost sentient. The witness could still feel the touch of the aliens' connection lingering in dreams, and sudden chills and the pulse in the footage mirrored the rhythm felt in the chest. On that first night, a pattern emerged, suggesting intelligence beyond Earth that had chosen to reveal itself only briefly and selectively. Humanity had been watched, noted, and perhaps guided, and yet the message remained tantalizingly incomplete, leaving questions that burned in the minds of all who tried to understand. The impossible had brushed against ordinary lives and vanished, leaving only echoes, signs, and the knowledge that the universe was far larger, stranger, and more intelligent than anyone had dared imagine. The town looked at the desert differently now, with all fear and curiosity, knowing that the night of lights was not an end but a beginning, a revelation that would haunt dreams, stir hearts, and challenge understanding forever.